Hey everybody, it's James Lindsay. You're listening to the New Discourses podcast, and in particular, you're listening to another long, weird episode of the New Discourses podcast because we're going to talk about something weird, yet again, in rather tremendous depth. We're going to talk about the United Nations. And a matter of fact, what we're going to talk about is there was a United Nations character, I'll kind of spell this out in a minute, named Robert Mueller. And in the 2,000 days leading up to the year 2000, so the 2,000 days leading up to January 1st, 2000, Robert Mueller, who was by no means a small player in the United Nations pantheon, laid out what he called 2,000 ideas and dreams for a better world, or sometimes he referred to it as 2,000 ideas or 2,000 ideas for the year 2000. And in essence, he was laying out ideas and dreams, like kind of his just thoughts, 2,000 of them, as a matter of fact, for the direction that the United Nations should take and the role it should play in the world in the 21st century. And the point of this podcast is to tell you some of what he said, and so that we can realize that the direction of the United Nations, whatever the United Nations was intended to be from its origins, and since it originated with the Huxleys, I don't think it was necessarily ever meant to be a good organization. I think it's always had theosophical roots, but it is unambiguous in these documents that Robert Mueller, and I'll tell you who he is in a second, you know who he is, you just don't realize you know who he is. He's not the guy that prosecuted Trump. That's a different Robert Mueller, or I should say investigated Trump. It's spelled differently. They're not the same guy. But you've heard of him before. It's unambiguous in these documents that Robert Mueller wanted the United Nations to reconstitute itself for the 21st century, that he wasn't satisfied with how theosophical the United Nations was in the 20th century, and he wanted it to reconstitute itself as an explicitly very theosophical organization going into the 21st century. So he delivers this in the late 1999, I should specify, to the UN Secretary General at the time, and urges him to, read these. And the document I'm pulling from is a small document that he sent specifically to the Secretary General to pay attention to, which is a condensation. So the way Robert Mueller published 2,000 ideas and dreams for a better world, or 2,000 ideas for the year 2000, was in 4 volumes. All 4 volumes are on his website, robertmueller.org. I'll make those available in links to this, so you can go see all 2,000 ideas if you want. He said he was going to write 3,000 ideas because the plans were meant to extend to the year 3000 for the United Nations. But I don't know if the other 1,000 ever got written. I haven't looked that deeply into it yet. But he wrote this condensed version where he wrote 59 pages of the ones that he thought were most important in the realm of spiritual direction that the UN should take in world leadership, including, of course, a one world government headquartered through the United Nations or coordinated through the United Nations. And it's kind of creepy how much of it seems to fit with what we're dealing with, because this is straight occult theosophy guiding the ship of the United Nations, which means the United Nations, whatever it started as, and like I said, I don't think it started good. I think it's always been an occult theosophical organization, and I think there are reasons to believe that that's true, some of which I've discussed before, like in the WTF is SEL podcast. Certainly for the last 2 decades, since I will say specifically 2003, it has been oriented toward a transformational project, and that transformational project is rooted in occult theosophy. So it's not a good organization, it's not a neutral organization, it's not even really a governing organization. It is an occult organization. It is a, best you could say, is really weird organization. Worst you could say is that it's genuinely an evil organization. And I think that this is all very positive, the way that Robert Mueller wrote this, but I think that we're going to come away understanding that. And because this is going to be really long, I've set aside almost 10,000 words of his writing to explore. I want to just kind of dive in and not preamble too much, but we got to start with who is Robert Mueller. So Robert Mueller worked at the United Nations. It's Muller. It's not, again, the same guy who investigated Trump. That's a different Robert Mueller, spelled differently. He worked at the United Nations for over 40 years. He was at one time the Assistant Secretary General, so he was very high up. He was very well respected. He was very well networked throughout the United Nations through much of that long career. But more importantly, and this is where you've heard of him before, is he's the guy who developed the World Core Curriculum, which was meant to be a new education method for the entire planet, according to a set of core curriculum points that were going to be core to the entire world's education program. In the United States, that became Common Core. So Common Core was created slightly indirectly, but basically by Robert Mueller at the United Nations. Now, and I introduced that concept to you previously in the very long WTF is SEL. What the F is Social Emotional Learning podcast that I did some time ago, where I pointed out that Robert Mueller's ideas were in fact strongly influenced by the occult theosophist who created the Lucifer Publishing Company named Alice Bailey. His ideas about education were inspired by an occult theosophist named Alice Bailey. Now, the point of that podcast wasn't to talk about Common Core and its origins or Robert Mueller. It was just kind of a sidebar. The point was to talk about social emotional learning and its development at the Fetzer Institute. Now, I want to remind you, by the way, so far as these two programs go, social emotional learning and Common Core, both of these were very heavily funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation gave hundreds of millions of dollars to pushing the Common Core or the World Core curriculum into the United States. But that wasn't enough. And when Common Core kind of started to falter and it got replaced with social emotional learning starting in 2015 and 16, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has dumped possibly up to $2 billion into pushing that. But the point is that they're both based in the same occult theosophy deriving from the rantings of Alice Bailey and others. But Robert Mueller was no small player. Like I said, he was Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations for a while. He was named the Chancellor of the United Nations University for Peace, which is headquartered in Costa Rica. He talks about this. He also organized a group you haven't heard about yet, but you're going to need to hear about, which is called the Evolutionary Leaders. Who are the Evolutionary Leaders? Well, they're a bunch of theosophical occult weirdos who believe in something that is called the New Thought movement or New Thought religion. I would say it's the Gnostic New Thought movement because it is a Gnostic and Hermetic kind of spin-off cult. It has roots tied back to, I know I've talked about this briefly in the past with some of the Gnosticism and Hermeticism podcasts, it has roots tied back into the Kabbalion, which is probably written by this guy Atkinson. I always say his name a little bit messed up. I got to work on that. And so this is like legit theosophical, I would say New Age, but the name of it's actually New Thought. And that it's a Gnostic approach. It's a Gnostic religion. And their goal is to make a Gnostic one world religion that's the one religion of the world that's coordinated and interwoven with the governments, a world government through the United Nations. And you would be very familiar if you are a daytime TV aficionado from the 90s and early 2000s with lots of the evolutionary leaders, even though you didn't know you're familiar with them because Oprah Winfrey has platformed every single one of them. The so-called New Age stuff, which is all occult theosophy that Oprah Winfrey and her book club mainlined into middle-class moms and primarily their daughters and somewhat their sons for the last several, decades, is all Gnostic New Thought. And the New Thought movement itself, by the way, has been recognized as a world religion now. It's not recognized in the United States specifically as a religion, but it is recognized as a world religion by an international body that certifies these things. So I want to thank particularly Lisa Logan for showing me this. I mean, I wasn't digging into Robert Mueller. I probably should have been, but she started to, and she showed me this, and she's helped me understand and link out all the connections between Robert Mueller and the United Nations to the evolutionary leaders, which she's researching tremendously right now, and to the Gnostic New Thought movement, which she's researching right now. And she got into chasing all this down basically by pursuing the Alice Bailey stuff that we were talking about a year ago. And so, or a little over a year ago now, a year and a half ago. So this is deep and dark stuff, and I'm barely skimming the surface of it. And I really want to thank Lisa Logan for all the work she's doing and for bringing this to my attention so that I can bring it to your attention. But if you really want the deep dives on this, she's already been putting some of it out, and she's going to be putting a lot more of it out that's going to really expose this. You need to go follow and pay attention to Lisa Logan. So she's at I am Lisa Logan. Everything's spelled the way you think it is. That's on the X, and you can figure her out further from there. She's doing an amazing job digging this stuff up and making us understand it. So she sent me this condensed document that is 59 pages of a summary for 2,000 Ideas and Dreams for a Better World. And I have stuck to that document, even though when you go read all 2,000 of the ideas, like there are some other ones that are so insane that it was super hard not to add them. It's very hard not to read basically all of this, which would take like weeks of podcasts to get through all of it. There's 2,000 of them. But anyway, this document was originally published and sent with its full reply on March 17th, 1999. It says it begins with a handful of letters back and forth between Robert Mueller and the Office of the Secretary General of the United Nations, and it says, "Dear Robert, your thoughtful letter and book, Ideas and Dreams for a Better World, arrived. The Secretary General wishes to thank you for the dedication and inspiration you continue to give to the cause of peace, justice, and freedom. Your dynamic and eloquent leadership gives courage to so many who share our goals. The Secretary General looks forward to reading your book with care and ask that I convey your views to other officials." So why I included this little letter reply from the beginning is to frame who Robert Mueller is. He's a very important character. The Secretary General has a direct correspondence with him. He wishes to thank Robert Mueller for his dedication and inspiration, and he applauds Robert Mueller's dynamic and eloquent leadership. And in particular, though, this is what he says, is that this dynamic and eloquent leadership gives courage, and I quote, "to so many who share our goals." Well, what are those goals? This is an occult theosophy document, as you're going to hear. What are the goals of the United Nations? That's the question that this really raises. And I want to point out, it says the Secretary General looks forward to reading your book with care and ask that I convey your views to other officials. So this is in March 1999, March 17th, 1999, as a matter of fact. My thought is almost all of this horrific stuff, whether it's ESG, guess what year that was created? 2003. Comprehensive Sexuality Education, 2003. A bunch of the other UNESCO and UN initiatives that are actually shaping the global agenda that we're all getting put through right now, all started in 2003, which is a few years down the road from this. Did this inform those? That's a legitimate question at this point. The reorganization and kind of pedal to the metal of the United Nations, which at the time would have been pushing Agenda 21. So what's the relevance of the timing? The idea was that by the year 2021, which did not succeed, that we would enter into a new world. That was the idea of Agenda 21. And it was based off of what were called the Millennium Development Goals, which preceded the Sustainable Development Goals. Okay. And there were 8 of those. There were 17 Sustainable Development Goals, I will remind you, with their magic number 17. So I'm strongly suspicious that the reason that it all started in 2003 is because 2003 plus 17 is 2020. So they have a 17-year-long cycle in order to try to implement Agenda 21 so that the new world starts on it starts in, I don't know what date they would have picked specifically within the year, but in 2021. Much like we're supposed to have a new world now, as they delayed it and pushed it back in 2030. That's why they call it, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals are for 2030. It's literally called Agenda 2030. People want to say, you're a conspiracy theorist. Is it a conspiracy if it's like literally an agenda? Wouldn't the people be working on the agenda? Wouldn't the Secretary General looks forward to reading your book with care and ask that I convey your views to other officials because it gives it gives courage to so many who share our goals? Well, what the hell are those goals? Well, let's dive into this and see what some of this book says. But first, let me give you some context, because the next thing in the document that was published here that I have is that Robert Mueller, this is the response to Robert Mueller's letter. Robert Mueller then includes his own letter that he sent. I'm not going to read all of it, obviously, and this isn't the excerpts from the book. This is just the cover letter, and he sent that on March 6th. So again, just underline what a deal this guy is. Robert Mueller sent this on March 6, 1999, and 11 days later, and I'm not claiming some numerology to that, 11 days later, he had a response saying that it was going to be disseminated through the Secretary General of the UN and other people. So he's a very influential character. So his letter, Robert Mueller's letter, this is Robert Mueller, starts off this way. Dear Mr. Secretary General, with the year 2000, you are becoming the most important person on Earth in the entire human history. How can you face this overwhelming challenge in one of the most complex and messy human, Earth, and evolutionary situations this planet has ever known? Well, here are a few advices from a lifetime world public servant and direct aide to 3 former secretaries general. Now, I'm not going to read all these advices, which are mostly a reminder to the Secretary General of his power and his importance as what's called the Millennium Assembly for the year 2000 was approaching. So what was this power and importance? Obviously, you're becoming the most important person on Earth in the entire human history because of the year 2000 is what Mueller said to the guy. And in terms of what the complex, messy human, Earth, and evolutionary situations, the most complex ones that the Earth has ever known. And so he's reminding him of his power in terms of getting all of the world's leaders on the same page as their agenda. And so that's what the advices are really about. You need to wake up in the morning and look at yourself and realize how important your job is. You need to get the other world leaders on board with what we're doing. We need as many of them as possible. That's your role. We have to prepare for the Millennium Assembly. That's the kind of advices that are there. And I'm laughing that he called it advices, plural, instead of advice. So then after indicating that the Secretary General should have all of his officers read all 4 volumes of this 2000 ideas and to incorporate as many of them are useful into the Millennium Assembly, which is supposed to set the trajectory for the United Nations in the new millennium. So in some sense, not just for the 21st century, but all the way to the year 3000, presuming, like I told you a minute ago, that Robert Mueller believed that there would be UN global governance till the year 3000, a millennium of this tyranny. After urging that all the officers read this 2000 Ideas book that I'm going to share from, he then notes that the purpose of this particular document that he's sending, which is an excerpt from the 4 volumes, is to relay 59 pages of the ideas that he wrote in 2000 Ideas that are pertinent to a global religious movement. And I'm telling you, it's occult theosophy. And that's what we're going to focus on. In fact, we're going to focus hard on that one magic word there, evolutionary, because that's what these people think that they're doing. And like I said, Robert Mueller organized a group that are called the evolutionary leaders that believe that they're going to be able to direct the spiritual evolution of man in the correct direction. Now, I will point out that theosophists throughout history have believed this. The Gnostics believed this. The ancient Hermeticists believed this. Karl Marx believed this. The point of seizing the means of economic production was that Karl Marx believed that the means of economic production produced economic conditions, and economic conditions produced people. It produced who you were. So if you seize and transform the means of economic production, you seize the means of producing man to be different, in fact, to become socialist or eventually communist, ideally, which is a spiritual evolution because Marx's idea is that communism in its true form is in his words, positive transcendence of private property as human self-estrangement. So in other words, Marx believed that we're going to seize the means of production of man so that we transcend our fallen form of private property owning individuals. We're going to go back into a unified social and creative entity, mass entity, collective entity, where we are our own creators, direct our own evolution, and an end point of that evolution is this liberated communist utopia. And this isn't that far off. This is another branch on the same tree. I'm not calling this guy a Marxist. I don't think he is. I think he's another branch on the same theosophical tree. But that's what this document is actually about, is communicating 59 pages worth of these crackpot ideas, and I had to do some work to select down to just staying under 10,000 words of them, pertinent to a global religious movement. And that global religious movement's purpose is to direct the future evolution of man. There's a word for that. It's called eugenics. Evolutionary leaders could be called eugenics leaders very easily. It's like a rebrand to hide what they really are. But I want to stress that the goal is not, whether it's communism, whether it's New Thought, the goal, whether it's Margaret Sanger's Planned Parenthood, which is another branch on this same tree, the goal is not, and Alice Bailey made this very clear, and I talked about this in the WTF is SEL podcast as well about Alice Bailey, the goal is not to direct the physical evolution of man so much to say. Alice Bailey called that exoteric eugenics and said it's not good. It's to direct the spiritual evolution of man, which is, of course, co-constituted or intrinsically interwoven with the physical evolution of man. So the goal is actually to direct man on a spiritual level, but we have to work with the crude means that we have. In other words, as above, so below. So the spiritual level of man imprints on his physical form, and as below, so above. So we work with the physical forms, we work with physical things to direct the spiritual evolution, as below, so above. And when that happens, just like Karl Marx believed in the cycle of man creates society, creates man, creates society, here we have the idea that we're going to direct the consciousness of man until the consciousness of man changes, spiritual evolution, and that will cause a new man to arise who's more in line with that level of spirituality. And their goal is to push us into a new age, which just so happens to be under their control because of their global world. I want to say religion, that's the word they're kind of using it, but it's a cult. This is the largest cult startup in the history of the world, and ultimately the theosophical religions across the board all have the exact same idea, that the fundamental human right is to be back in the Garden of Eden, that we have a fundamental right to a liberated utopia. So when you hear them talk about our, human rights or whatever, then you say, well, they just seem to make up a new right like every other day. This is a right, that's a right, everything's an intrinsic right. What they believe is that they have an intrinsic right to live in utopia. And literally it's to, if we go kind of deeper into the old theosophical religions, that to re-enter into the Garden of Eden, that the God that kicked us out is some kind of an evil demiurgic being, or it's a result of a cosmic negative accident that kicked us out of our inheritance in the perfected utopia of Eden, and that we have an inalienable right to live in Eden, that we have been alienated from because of a cruel and wicked circumstance of whatever caused us to fall. In the past, it was the serpent luring us to eat the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and then God kicked us out, which is characterized as an evil act and proof that the God portrayed in Genesis is a demon. Or with Marx, it's the advent of private property and the individualism that follows from it. With the queer theory, it would be the advent of people believing they can define what it means to be normal for a human being, and thus falling into the same kind of situation and estranging one another. But their belief is that we have a fundamental, inalienable right to re-enter the Garden of Eden, and that happens by advancing our spiritual and collective societal human evolution into the direction indicated by their religious crackpottery. So like I said, it is the largest cult startup in the history of the world, and my essential claim, just to put it very bluntly in this podcast, is that at least in this century, so at least for the last 2 decades and maybe a little more, the United Nations has been devoted to this goal and has been devoted to being the headquarters for this cult movement with all of its power, all of its extensions. And so there's no reason that we should be participating in the United Nations whatsoever. It is a cult theosophical organization. That's my hypothesis. So just another snippet from Muller before we get down to these ideas. He says, with Dr. Karan Singh of India, we have just created a World Commission on Global Consciousness and Spirituality to promote a much-needed spiritual renaissance. That's the goal of this document. That's the goal of what the United Nations was setting up around the year 2000 up to 2003 when they started pushing all of this stuff. He says, I'm sending other members an excerpt of 59 pages of ideas regarding religion and spirituality similar to the one on the future, and future's capitalized here. So that's this document. That's the 59 pages. This document is the 59 pages of what Robert Mueller thinks the United Nations needs to understand about religion and spirituality and what it should look like in the 21st century and actually in the entire third millennium. And it's all connected to something that they call their World Commission on Global Consciousness and Spirituality. There's that consciousness word. That's a theosophical tell, that there's some secret consciousness that you awaken to, that, and if you don't have it, you're basically like cattle. And it's this document is meant to be issued in pursuit of a, quote, much needed spiritual renaissance. Like I said, he then goes on to note that he says, these are Robert Mueller's 2,000 ideas, started on 11 July 1994, 2,000 days before 1 January 2000. So I only bring that up because I want to point out to you how invested they are in symbolism. It's not a hard calculation, but it's a calculation. You have to sit down and very intentionally decide to figure out which day on the calendar is 2,000 days before January 1st, 2000. And that day happened to work out mathematically to July 11th, 1994. And that was the day he decided to start writing 2,000 ideas for the 21st century. He didn't write one idea a day, even though that seems to be it. He wrote on average one idea per day, but he also is proud that he finished a little bit early. And that's why he was able to submit this on the 6th of March, 1999, instead of having to wait until, December or something. And so this document I'm about to read from is exactly what Mueller indicates. It's 59 pages, totaling perhaps a couple hundred of these 2,000 ideas that he considers specifically essential to a spiritual renaissance for the world, meant to be facilitated and coordinated into a single world religion through the United Nations. I am not going to read all of the ideas, all the few hundred ideas in this. I'm not going to read them in order either, because that would bury the lead. Now, I am burying the lead a little bit, but I want to give you a flavor of it. And we're going to, of course, build in the level of crazy, so stick with me. But I'm going to start with some of the ideas further down on the list, and then kind of return to some earlier ones with a couple of exceptions. I'm going to do a couple right from the very beginning, just to give you an idea, because it's, again, relevant to understanding who Robert Mueller is and what much of his life work involved. And I just want you to keep in the back of your mind all along, this is the guy who created the education program that became Common Core. This is the guy who created Common Core. So idea 105, written on the 23rd of October, 1994. For the sake of this planet and humanity's future, an Office of Global Education should be created in every Ministry of Education. Global education should be required in all schools of Earth, from kindergarten to university, and in all professional schools, especially for journalism and the media. So he understood very clearly that messaging apparatuses and schools messaging apparatuses need to be captured through their schools, and he understood that schools themselves need to be turned into brainwashing apparatuses for his global education. And that's the Common Core program that he invented. So then that's idea 105. Idea 103, which he wrote 2 days earlier on the 21st of October, 1994. While the exact sciences are all of a global, universal nature, the social sciences are not. Now reflect on what we just talked about with George Soros, right? Who published the book Alchemy of Finance, arguing exactly the same thing 2 years before this. While the exact sciences are all of a global, universal nature, the social sciences are not. There is urgent need for a global anthropology, global sociology, global psychology, global political science that he calls planetetics. Did I say that right? No, planetics. Sorry, planetics. Planet ICS. Planetics. Sorry. Global literature, global art, global culture, global philosophy, global futurology, etc. Margaret Mead was the first prophet recommending it. Now, Margaret Mead is the anthropologist who went around and is basically the mother of cultural relativism, which is this kind of idea that matriculated in strongly into the social sciences, and in particular into the postmodern theory that says that no culture can judge one another. And this actually dovetails very nicely with these occult theosophical ideas, which is that there's exactly one religion, thus there's exactly one philosophy, there's exactly one science, there's exactly one faith, there's exactly one culture. And what that actually is what they called the Prisca Theologia, the ancient theology, which is the occult theology that is frankly flat out denied by the Bible. So we're not looking in good directions here so far. So let me just give you, now that we've had a lot of preamble, throat clearing, etc., let me just give you the trigger warning, I guess. What is going to sound like an old 1950s TV show, or maybe Unsolved Mysteries from the 1980s. What you are about to hear will disturb you. It's true. What you're about to hear will actually probably disturb you. My only commentary then in setting out is, I want you to keep in mind, this is the real United Nations. When we look under the hood of the UN, this is what we're dealing with. Even with all the positive aspirational language, this is disturbing. This is occult theosophy trying to create a world cult religion that we're all stuck inside. And it's, in fact, a transformational religion, a transmutational religion, a evolutionary religion. And so they mean to seize the means of human spiritual production and societal production such that we will move into our next evolutionary phase. And that's the goal of the United Nations, at least in the 21st century and third millennium. So let's start with some stuff we generally already know about the UN and its agendas so we don't overwhelm too quickly, so that we can kind of understand how to orient what we already know about the United Nations in terms of what Mueller is indicating is underneath those agendas, which is the occult theosophy that this podcast is about. So as a result, I'm going to start near the end of the document with idea 1912. The creation, he says, by the Rio de Janeiro Conference of an Earth Council. So we're all familiar that a lot of this environmental sustainability crap all got kicked off and coordinated at the Rio Conference, the Earth Council, in 1992. So the creation of the Rio de Janeiro Conference of an Earth Council is a great step ahead in human history. One of its first tasks is to draft an Earth Charter. An admirable text of that charter is now in circulation among non-governmental organizations, NGOs, for their comments. It opens a completely new chapter of world charters. So here's where the NGOs become the relevant bodies to push all of this crap. We also need a charter for the seas and oceans, a charter for outer space, for the air and atmosphere, for the world's waters, for mountain areas, and for arid zones, for the world's forestry covers, for the world's vegetation, for other species, for human settlements, etc. A vast new field of human philosophy, behavior, and future evolution has been opened, the fundamental rights of the earth. So all of this sustainable crap follows straight from this. And you hear what they're after. Governance of everything in a evolutionary theosophical sense. Governance of everything. The seas, the oceans, outer space, the air, the atmosphere, the water, mountains, deserts, forests, vegetation, all the species, human settlements. They want control over all of it. And we see exactly those kinds of things coming down the pike today. That's exactly what they're working with this kind of new Earth Charter. So, idea 1930. The UN General Assembly 2000 at the heads of states level must absolutely measure up to its historical tasks and be remembered for its audacity and long-term views of the future. It should, above all, decide to embark on the writing of a constitution for proper Earth government. If it does not, future historians will not forgive its members. So in the year 2000, the United Nations General Assembly is tasked, at least in this idea, with embarking on the writing of a new constitution for proper Earth government, which does what? What the previous thing said. It opens up a vast new field of human philosophy, behavior, and future evolution in the fundamental rights of the earth. So the Constitution that's supposed to be for global government that they're supposed to write in the year 2000 is designed to push the fundamental rights of the earth. And he says if it does not, future historians will not forgive its members. Well, it turns out future historians are probably not going to forgive its members, but it's not because they did not, it's because they did. Idea 1931. At this stage of our evolution, the concept of completion and survival of... Sorry, I messed that up. At this stage of our evolution, so let's frame our heads here. He's talking directly about our evolution. That means mankind's evolution. At this stage of our evolution, the concept of competition and survival of the fittest must be abandoned in favor of the concept of cooperation. Oh, hello, Karl Marx. Hello, all the Theosophists. The world future evolution of the earth and of humanity depends on it. Only cooperation will save the earth and humanity. From now on, cooperation must be the supreme law of earth and human survival. We must aim at a united earth and nature. There's the seed right there for the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and how they operate. And he's not just calling for a global government to be set up through the United Nations and organized in line with extending the 1992 Rio de Janeiro Earth Council Accord, but that it must also redirect the mechanisms of evolution of humanity, specifically. Never mind the laws of nature, never mind nature's God, never mind a biblical God for sure. It is now time for a whole new principle that just so happens to be cooperation, aka communism, but kind of elevated communism, above communism even. And I want to stress this point that this evolution is meant in a spiritual sense. The goal is to change the consciousness of man so that man behaves differently, and through changing consciousness and through changing how we behave, we become new people, a new species, a more advanced species. And in fact, we become a communal species. And that's very important. These evolutionary leaders that I mentioned before that he organized, this is very important because they actually see it. Here's the idea. And I'm stealing from Lisa here, so this is going to be a little bit rough. Lisa Logan again. I am Lisa Logan. You should go follow her. So the general idea is they say, well, look at what you have. You have these bacteria, and the bacteria start to make colonies and groups, and they group together. There's a real video. She'll show you the real video eventually. There's a real video I've seen of this guy giving this lecture. So this isn't us riffing. There's also books explaining this. So the bacteria form, various colonies or whatever, and some of the colonies figure out that if they share resources in certain ways, that they're more successful. And so they can out-compete the other ones. So bacteria colonies, which are kind of communities of bacteria, do better. And eventually a thing called a biofilm can form around them so that the colony itself becomes sort of a single entity. And then the various different bacteria within it can specialize to do this, to do that, to do the other thing for the collective. And then what you end up with is something like an amoeba. You end up with a more complex organism. And that's one step in an evolutionary spiral that happens to look exactly like all the evolutionary hermetic spirals that I've put on Twitter over time. Like they literally use the same graphic. And out comes a new species. And this is how evolutionary leaps to higher order creatures, they say, are made. And so eventually amoebas form colonies, or something that are like amoebas form colonies, and they get a biofilm, and then you have a more complex organism, and on and up until you end up with animals, and then you end up with mammals, and then you end up with human beings. And so they think that we are at the stage, and this is the point of their evolutionary idea, where human beings themselves are ready to take the next evolutionary leap into a global collective. And the biofilm, we've already formed communities, but the biofilm that ties us together, that makes us all into one thing, is the internet. And the internet can be directed so that within all the different communities of people start to work together for one global program. And so we're meant to become one superorganism on the earth. And in fact, in alignment with the earth, as part of the earth. And that's what their idea of evolution is. But to get people to do this, they have to elevate their thinking. In other words, they have to have consciousness raising. In other words, they have to have evolution of consciousness into a global, and even as we're going to hear, cosmic consciousness or astral consciousness that goes above that and can picture humanity operating as a global collective. Again, I urge you to realize that this is the exact same program Karl Marx was banging on about. Karl just had a different method and a different formulation, but it's the exact same method, that we are all the same. We're all the same collective. We're all intrinsically meant to be working together, but only the spiritually advanced, what Karl Marx called socialists, can actually see it. And here, it's going to be people with cosmic consciousness. And he is dead serious that the purpose of the United Nations going forward is going to be to direct the spiritual evolution of man into a single global collective and a single transformational, that is heretical, evil world religion. So let's skip straight to the end and read Idea 2000, and we're going to see this is pretty explicit. He says, from our current world pessimism, we can be saved and uplifted by this personal conclusion I arrived at in Idea 552. Namely, perhaps out of my passion for life and for this miraculous earth, a new theory of evolution can be shaped. Namely, that with our recently acquired tremendous human knowledge of the universe and of our planet, we will henceforth be more than the mere preservers and savers of the earth, but will be her instruments, her most advanced evolutionary agents, her children endowed with the evolutionary task to make it an even more astonishing planet and cosmic evolutionary success, perhaps the most advanced, ultimate masterpiece in the universe and God. Since each species born from nature is a miracle, we are certainly a miracle too. What great excitement it will be when in the year 2000 humanity will accept this as its new, all-encompassing common objective for the 21st century, to make this earth a paradise, to make humanity a miracle. So I'm not kidding. That's literally what he's about. That's literally the program. So let's make something extremely clear. Going to remind you of a word I already used. An intentional theory of evolution for mankind is eugenics. Let me say that again, because that's what the United Nations through Robert Mueller is advocating for. And like I said, this is the real United Nations, at least in this century. I think maybe all along. I seriously think that. But at least in this century. Let me just say that sentence one more time, and I'll say it slowly so it sinks in. An intentional theory of evolution for mankind is eugenics. The call for man to complete God's creation is esoteric, occult theosophy. We could talk about whether it's inspired from Hermetic ideas. You hear the idea straight up, the Gnostic concept in idea number 2000 here. From our current world pessimism, we can be saved and uplifted by this secret knowledge that we can actually have a directed evolution to become the ultimate masterpiece of the universe and God. So let me make that real clear. This is eugenics. This is the real United Nations, and its operating system is a call for man to complete God's creation, which is esoteric, occult theosophy. We should have nothing to do with this organization. It is not merely a meeting place for governance to figure out global treaties and things like that. It's nothing of the kind. And he's extremely serious about this and devotes many of his ideas to making this a reality through his vision for a United Nations-centered world government. Let's read 1904, idea number 1904. I recommend that a totally new world organization should be considered for our Earth and humanity, a world organization of evolution into which the United Nations could be incorporated. This organization would listen to evolutionary scientists who look at evolution in its multiplicity of forms, from the smallest bacteria to the evolution of humankind within the basic elements of the planet, its airs, its water, its climate, etc., and who have a long-term view, Gnostic, who have a long-term view of what the future evolution of this planet is likely to be. This is indispensable because henceforth everything on this planet has to be seen in terms of a long-term future evolution. Our species is now in charge of the Earth's future evolution. If we stick to obsolete values, we will put an end to it. But if we adopt new values, new objectives, visions, institutions, and laws, evolution will continue. This is henceforth problem number one on this planet. Everything else has to abide to it. He then continues this thought in idea 1905. The New World Organization of Evolution would issue yearly reports on the state of evolution of our planet, review the prospects of the future, and recommend corrective actions, including emergency measures and world laws. Idea 1906. The most important single step that could help save the Earth and humanity would be to create in each government a Ministry of the Future, and in the United Nations and in each of its agencies a Department and Commission of the Future. It would be the first step toward the creation of a world organization of evolution. It is good that the European Union had the vision to create a position of Commissioner for the Future. May this good example be followed by many institutions around the world, public and private. ESG serves that role, by the way, in a slightly different capacity without necessarily a direct department. That's what ESG was designed to do. Besides the redirecting of money into impact investing, ESG was designed to assess the long-term viability in terms of environmental and social programs plus corporate governance practices. So there you go. Idea 1907, to get a punchline to this, when one considers the vital importance of the future evolution of this planet and of humanity, it would be also important to create a world university of evolution and the future, or at least faculties of evolution and the future in all universities. So when I did that episode not that long ago where I talked about the UNESCO document, it was a series of 4, The Strange Death of the University, where I talked about how the Sustainable Development Goals were to be incorporated completely into university education ASAP at all levels. There you go. Now this stuff is crazy, but it gets way crazier than this. We're not even close to crazy. So I'm going to skip to like the first part of super crazy. In fact, this might be the craziest part. I showed this to Charlie Kirk and he was just like, what? Like, what? Whoa. Like, overwhelming. It's this freaking crazy. But I want my Christian audience to listen very carefully to what this says, because I need you to understand how off the rails the United Nations is and how out of step. Why are they attacking Christianity so hard? Well, you just heard the old values are going to kill the planet. The old beliefs are going to kill the planet. We have to get rid of them. So what does he propose here? It's not just that he intends his vision to be moved by the governments, but very explicitly he intends it to be moved by a single new world religion coordinated as an evolutionary religion, that is, occult theosophy, headquartered through the United Nations or through a new body that the United Nations is incorporated into. And the goal is for him, and I'm not kidding, listen, the goal for him is to envision the United Nations as the body that is tasked with resetting the world, a great reset, right? Resetting the world with a new creation. I mean that because the next thing he talks about, at least that I'm going to tell you about, these are from ideas, we were just in the 1900s, we're skipping back to the 1300s. He literally talks about the concept of a United Nations-centered new Genesis. Genesis is the first book of the Bible. Genesis 1 and 2 describe the creation of the world. If you recall your Genesis 1, he talks about the 7 days in which God created the world, the 6th in which he created it, and the 7th upon which he saw that it was good and rested. So pulling from ideas 1301 to 1400, which he offers in a single block in this document with the heading, The Spiritual State of the World on Earth Day 2013, here's what he writes. Humanity is now a united world community of nations, not only economic and political, but also spiritual. Following the path opened in the last century by Dag Hammarskjöld and by U Thant in the United Nations, by Robert Schuman in Europe, and also throughout the millennia by prophets and founders of religions and by great sages such as Plato, Aristotle, Maimonides, Huxley, Albert Schweitzer, Teilhard de Chardin, who was an outright Hermeticist, Thomas Berry, Bishop William Swing, and others. I'm sure digging into all of those people will uncover that they have very questionable religious beliefs, maybe apart from Aristotle. Humanity's material, scientific, and technological feats of the 20th century, he says, have been transcended first into the moral ethical realm, then into philanthropy and Gaia-phily, love for humanity and our earth. That's the key value, by the way, not just of his program, but of the degrowth communism to fix the metabolic rift that Marx predicted. If you go back and listen to the degrowth communism podcast that I did recently, you'll see it's the exact same idea, Gaia-phily, love for humanity and for our earth. It's all theosophical occultism. Marxism's just a branch of theosophical occultism that had a very powerful success record in installing itself politically. And so he says, humanity's feats of the 20th century have been transcended first into the moral, ethical realm, then into philanthropy and Gaia-phily, and finally into the highest form of all, the spiritual dimension heralded for so long by all religions, namely the right understanding of our place and relationship in the universe and in time, and of our fundamental cosmic nature and role. If you needed more proof that this is occult theosophy, I don't know what to tell you, but he's invoking the underlying Hermetic concept of the Prisca Theologia there, that there is this ancient world religion that all sciences, all thought, all cultures, all religions, all everything are just reflections of. Hinduism's just doing the best it can, just like quantum physics is doing the best it can to explain this one true thing about all of reality. And he thinks that we've now hit the point where we can actually start to articulate that. The phenomenal expansion of human senses and physical capacities through science and technology was followed by the birth and development of a global brain, a global nervous system, a global heart, and a global soul to humanity, so Hegel's Geist. Much remains to be done to perfect and refine these gains and to integrate them fully into the total life system of our living planet. Skipping a bit, we came to understand that we are all part of a total living planet, which is itself a cosmic body of the universe, and that in this living system we are linked not only to the earth but to each other and to the heavens in which we live. The miraculous transformation we have experienced in the progress of humanity is a result of our cooperation of the world's religions along the lines of the vast frameworks of our knowledge and our needed actions born in the United Nations and its agencies. So let's be real clear. He's saying that everything is all one, where that's the occult theosophical view, and that it's actually coming together through the United Nations and its agencies. These led to a better understanding of our planet and place in the universe, of our total human family, of our place in time, and of the miracle of individual human life. The last decades of the 20th century provided humanity with the global information and first experiences indispensable for our better behavior, for better Earth government, and for the physical, mental, moral, affective, and spiritual fulfillment of all humans blessed with the miracle of life. So we're going to skip a few grandiose paragraphs with fancy grandiose headings about the unique role of humans in place and time. We're going to skip down to one of his subject headings is titled The Miracle of Individual Life. This fourth framework, so you can guess that we skipped three, this fourth framework, which revolves around the centrality of the human person, goes far deeper and beyond human institutions. It has become increasingly clear that in the vast global quantum change in human consciousness, does that sound like Deepak Chopra? It does. Why? Because he's one of them. He's actually a very important figure. He's one of them. You know about the evolutionary leaders and people like Deepak Chopra? Because Oprah Winfrey put them on TV all the time, dozens of times, over and over and over again, and mainlined them into our culture. It has become increasingly clear that in the vast global quantum change in human consciousness, individuals are the alpha and omega. Oh, we're God. Okay. The basic living cosmic units of evolution. What? Don't all biological things evolve on the theory of evolution? But no, human beings, human consciousness, individuals. Individual human life is the highest form of universal consciousness. This is just the theosophical belief set that we are the unique creature that's able to figure out where the divine has been fragmented so that we can lead God to realize himself, so that God realizes that we are no different from one another or anything else, and in fact that we are always God. That's literally it. Individual human life is the highest form of universal consciousness. With the recognition of universal human rights and responsibilities, it became apparent that institutions, systems, states, groupings, entities had no consciousness and could only be instruments, servants, means for the increase of individual consciousness, fulfillment, and responsibility. The highest goal for humankind is to attain optimum physical, mental, affective, moral, and spiritual lives as a part of the total life system of our planet. So, are you getting the idea that this is a super crackpot religion? It is. Optimum physical life involves knowledge and care of the human body, the human ability to see, to hear, to observe, to create, to do, to act, to transform, and the expansion of all senses and physical abilities. There you go. Optimum meant that, by the way, Karl Marx says the same thing in the Economic Philosophic Manuscript, by the way, he says the exact same thing. It's the exact same theosophical nonsense. And I think that Karl Marx stole it from the Corpus Hermeticum. It's way too weird that it's in there in Karl Marx's Economic Philosophic Manuscripts, and that it so closely parallels to stuff that's in the Corpus Hermeticum, which is the ancient Hermetic religious text, which, by the way, has 17 books. The 17s just keep coming up. I'm just saying, this is exactly the same thing that's expressed there. And it's not because this guy's a Marxist, it's because Marx was one of them. It's that they are all theosophical occultists who think that they have the secret knowledge and the divine right to transform man to complete creation. They're the alpha and the man is the alpha and the omega, the beginning and the end, the creator and the conclusion. He says optimum mental life involves knowledge and education, which of course they took control of. The ability to question, to think, to analyze, to synthesize. To conclude, to communicate. The ability to focus from the infinitely small to the infinitely large, from the local to the global, from the past to the future. To be what Hinduism calls Trikodarshish. Sorry, I can't say it. I don't know. Omniscient. Particularly all-knowing across time, past, present, and future. And Trikolanaths, which is omnipotence, mastery of the three worlds. Optimum, effective, and moral life involves the ability to love and the human virtues of truth, understanding, humility, liberty, responsibility, reverence for life, compassion, altruism, and charity. And finally, optimum spiritual life involves the ability for interiority, meditation, prayer, communion with the universe and eternity and with God. Here, the United Nations, the United Religions, UNESCO, and other world agencies stand today in the forefront of human progress and evolution in the education, information, enlightened democracy, transcendence, and fulfillment of the miracle of human life and its contribution and responsibility in the overall cosmic evolution of our planet and of the universe. We have a role in the evolution of the universe? Like, this is the most ridiculous, but it's just occult theosophy. You've got to understand. You may not even know the word theosophy yet. You need to know the word theosophy because the spiritual war that we're in right now is theosophy versus theology. Theology is a serious pursuit of religious truth, and theosophy is occult. It's an occult. I was going to say it's an occult cult, which sounds stupid, so that's why I stalled out there. But that's what it is. It's a cult based on occult beliefs. He says this is where we stand at the moment in the year 2013. I don't know how this is in a document delivered in 1999. I don't know if it was added later. That's beside the point. It's in the freaking document. You can go look at it. I can show you the page numbers. He must have added to this and cobbled it together later as a kind of grouping of things that he thinks. But anyway, this is where we stand at the moment in the year 2013, 20 years after the Second World Parliament of Religions. It represents a unique, tremendous quantum jump in consciousness and evolution of humanity. We know our planet inside out, and we are now in charge of its future. That seems very taking on playing God. We even know a good part of the heavens. We have entered the cosmic age of our evolution. So skipping some more of this waffle, because I want to get to the scary stuff. Similarly, the pragmatic efforts of the religions and of the United Religions, that's an organization, by the way, are complemented by a World Spirituality University, which has developed a science of spirituality. Alice Bailey called it the science of right human relations, a strategy for spirituality, and a methodology of spirituality derived from all religious practices, celebrations, and rites around the world, aimed at the spiritual fulfillment and responsibility of human beings. As a result, the world is in a new period of full, flowering spiritual renaissance, far beyond interreligious dialogue. Remember, that's what he called for back in 1999, and here it is in 2013 saying that we're there. Based on the common spirituality of all religions and on a common denominator of all human beings, the yearning for answers to the mysteries of life and death and of our universe, to which the scientific age, despite its amazing advances, was unable to find satisfying answers. So they are going to know science better than science, because they're Gnostics. The age of scientific analysis and dissection, our checkered history of local cultures and national divisions, the millennia of religious dissections and of the spiritual nature of humanity, of the earth and of the cosmos have now led to a new age of universality, holism, evolutionism, and all-encompassing convergence, synthesis, synergy, and transcendence. That sounds like some Antichrist stuff. So I'm skipping a lot more after a bunch of bullet points for what this world might look like in practice, which probably I should cover, but this is going to be super long anyway. He says, at that point, I looked up from the text. So he's working on laying out what this should look like. At that point, I looked up from the text and seized a copy of a book I had written many years ago in the last century, meaning in the 90s, when I was a young world servant. I don't know if it's in the 90s, so before 2000, I should say. When I was a young world servant of the United Nations, entitled New Genesis, Shaping a Global Spirituality, and read the following text of mine. So this is the vision that was guiding his thought from very early on in his world servant capacity at the United Nations. He wrote, and God saw And God saw that all the nations of the earth, black and white, poor and rich, from north and south, from east and west, and all of the creeds, were sending their emissaries to a tall glass house on the shores of the river of the rising sun, on the island of Manhattan, to study together, to think together, and to care together for the world and all its people. And God said, that is good. And it was the first day of the new era of the earth. Pause. Where is the glass house on a tall glass house on the shores of the river of the rising sun on the island of Manhattan? Is it the United Nations building? It is. So let's phrase it more straightly. And God saw that all the nations of the earth and all its people from all its creeds were sending their emissaries to the United Nations building to study together, to think together, and care together for this world and all of its people. And God said, that is good. And it was the first day of the new era of the earth. This is the United Nations. This is the UN. Time to abolish the UN. But he's not done. And God saw that soldiers of peace were separating the combatants of quarreling nations. So that's their blue hats. That differences were being resolved by negotiation and reason instead of arms, and that leaders of nations were seeing each other, taking to each other, and joining their hearts, minds, souls, and strength. That's a reference to Jesus, the Gospels, for the benefit of all humanity. And God said, that is good. And it was the second day of the planet of peace. So he just compared the blue hats to Jesus' disciples, by the way. And God saw that humans were loving the entire creation, the stars and the sun, the day and the night, the air and the oceans, the earth and the waters, the fishes and the fowl, the flowers and the herbs, and all their human brethren and sisters. And God said, that is good. And it was the third day of the planet of happiness. And God saw that humans were suppressing hunger, disease, ignorance, and suffering all over the globe, providing each human person with a decent, conscious, and happy life. Notice conscious. And reducing the greed, the power, and the wealth of the few. And he said, that is good. And it was the 4th day of the planet of justice. And God saw that humans were living in harmony with their planet and in peace with one another, wisely managing their resources, avoiding waste, curbing excesses, replacing hatred with love, greed with contentment, arrogance with humility, division with cooperation, and mistrust with understanding. And he said, that is good. And it was the 5th day of the golden planet. And God saw that men were destroying their arms, bombs, missiles, warships, and warplanes, dismantling their bases and disbanding their armies, keeping only policemen of peace to protect the good from the bad and the normal from the mad. And God said, that is good. And it was the 6th day of the planet of reason. And God saw humans restore God. And God saw humans restore God in the human person as the Alpha and Omega. And God saw humans restore God in the human person as the Alpha and Omega, reducing institutions, beliefs, politics, governments, and all man-made entities to mere servants of God and the people. And he saw them adopt as their supreme law, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no greater commandment than these. And God said, that is good. And it was the 7th day of the planet of God. I let the book rest on my lap and looked around me at the magnificent divine nature of the sacred Mount Rasur and addressed these words of thanks to God. Thank you, dear Lord, for having fulfilled my dream. And I seized my harmonica and played on it the Ode to Joy of Beethoven. So it turns out this harmonica thing, that's the end of the page, this harmonica thing actually happened. I kind of meant to play it for you. Maybe we can work this thing in. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe I'll work in the sound so you can actually hear that it wasn't Robert Mueller, but somebody else played the harmonica in the United Nations and played Ode to Joy. And what that means is they knew that this was happening. So hopefully we'll cut this in.
Dear colleagues, these are our last decisions in this mandate, and I would like to thank you for 5 years of unity in diversity. It is our responsibility to keep Europe together, and let's rebuild Notre Dame, and happy Easter.
But that's certainly something, isn't it? Something very heretical. So how is it all supposed to work? Let's go back to his ideas. So now we know what they're up to. A new Genesis, a new recreated world, a new recreation of life, where God works on all 7 days, by the way, and in which the United Nations is a tall house of glass that is where God says that it all comes from. Isn't that great? So evil. And how's it supposed to work? Well, let's listen. Idea 1382 from the 23rd of April, 1998. Like the capitalists and communists did at the end of the last century, we should think hard and conceive how we can make the next century a paradise. Since both communism and capitalism have failed, and since we live in planetary conditions very different from those at the end of the last century, we must think afresh all of our current beliefs, doings, and institutions and formulate an entirely new ideology, or dreamology, for an unprecedented future in all human history. Heads of governments, of corporations, and of all human institutions should be excited by this new, wonderful challenge. And what should it challenge solve? Idea 1343, 15 March 1998. Humanity has achieved so much progress, has solved so many problems, avoided so many dangers, And yet now we face the most colossal problem in the entire human history and evolution, namely that industry, technology, commerce, transport, overpopulation, and overconsumption might destroy the very essence and future of the earth, including our own, namely its nature. We need innumerable great and small ideas and efforts to countervail that. But there's a huge problem in this idea, and that huge problem is called the United States of America. Idea 1338, 10 March 1998. From an evolutionary point of view, the attacks of the United States against the United Nations and reduction of its roles and means, in other words, we were pushing away from the UN and defunding it, will be considered someday as one of the greatest errors and lacks of vision in world history. It seems that power went so much to the head of the United States that it lost its sense of proportions and direction. Therefore, the United States will decline as a power, as did all past powers which did not adapt to new fundamental trends of evolution. This happens regrettably on the eve of a new century and millennium when all countries, especially the best informed ones, should have the clearest possible mind, views, and heart toward a future written in the stars. We must deeply mourn the fact that the United States has lost its consciousness of the world's future and of its guiding role in it. So what's wrong with the United States? It's powerful enough to be sovereign and to reject this theosophy in favor of individual rights and liberties instead of a crackpot world cult. What's happened since? Much of what has transpired in the 20th century, especially since about 2015, has been but actually all the way through, starting in 2001, September 11th, 2001. Much of what has transpired in the 21st century has been a direct attack on the United States for this rejection of the United Nations theosophical ambitions, exactly like Robert Mueller said would have to be the case. The United States will have to decline as a power because it's not in line with their evolutionary agendas. The United States had its run, but it's not going along with the program sufficiently, so they're going to have to let it fall. That seems to be very in line with their program. So the United States should have absolutely nothing to do with this organization. It should renew its attacks, it should renew its distance, and it should completely defund this evil organization. So then there's another big section based on another block of 100, based on ideas 1401 through 1500, and it's even crazier than this new Genesis idea that really sets the stage for what they want. It calls for a global association of scientists and thinkers concerned with long-range evolution. Now, this is an excerpt added in by Erica Erdman in her interim report published in November of 1997. And it starts off with a quote from so-called, quote, space scientist Eric Chison. I don't think I said his last name right, but whatever. The quote says, "Implicit within our cosmic evolutionary paradigm is a transcendence of the Darwinian principle of natural selection, a loftier standard that I call the principle of cosmic selection. Those technological civilizations of any type on any planet that recognize the need for, develop in time, and fully embrace a global ethics will survive, and those that do not will not." Okay, so let's be real clear about something here. So my Christian buddies, I need you to listen. When Darwin talked about evolution, these people reject that. That is not what they're talking about. They are, in fact, remember he said they were going to reject survival of the fittest. We're going to reject competition. That's what Darwin's ideas were based off of. That is not what they're advocating. They are not advocating for Darwinism. They're advocating for directed cosmic evolution. And the claim is that cosmic selection is the only planetary civilizations that survive are ones that adopt global ethics. What does that mean? And fully adopt, not just adopt it, but fully embrace global ethics. That means global cooperation. That means something like the vision of communism. That means the theosophical endpoint where we are all one. So if you don't adopt their theosophical occult views of what humanity is supposed to be, they believe that there's a pressure that all such civilizations will eventually go extinct and will not survive in the grand scheme of cosmic selection, which, by the way, is not real. That is not a theory by which anything is said to, say, speciate or differentiate or persist through time. But that's where it begins. So then we go back to Erica here, and she comments and says, his insight into global problems and his vast perspective led Dr. Robert Mueller, Chancellor Emeritus of the University for Peace in Costa Rica and former Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, to call for a UNESCO-backed summit meeting of the world's scientists and thinkers concerned with the long-term fate of our Earth and of humanity, which is endangered by blind pursuit of short-term goals. He envisions an interchange of knowledge and ideas among the most conscientious persons on the planet, leading to advances in human wisdom that could not otherwise occur, and that would initiate a permanent shift toward a more future-oriented, responsible attitude worldwide. So, this global ethic is supposed to be backed by these ideas that replace blind pursuit of short-term goals. Again, ESG came in 2003 to start pushing us in that direction. From where? The United Nations. Comprehensive sexuality education to, I guess, adopt a new global ethic was developed at UNESCO in 2003. All straight downstream from these ideas. So the objective, they state, the importance and urgency of the project lies in the need for a transformation of past-inspired ethics with their many contradictions, fundamentalist shackles, and mutual hatreds to a future-oriented ethic in which all of humanity can unite in a striving to become more enlightened and more humane. Apparently, we got to take down the U.S. first. Many scientists believe that the universe is dominated by a, quote, cosmic principle of self-destruction, a universal law that destroys any civilization in the universe which has achieved a level of intelligence and technical capacity similar to our own. I don't know who these many scientists are. Because intelligence is not the result of the fiercest competition during the process of evolution, they argue, our brains cannot possibly conceive of an alternative that would avert our fate. Other scientists see in the process of evolution a forward march, not toward more destructive competition, but toward more foresight, insight, wisdom, and love. These persons, most of whom are inspired by the teachings of Teilhard de Chardin, who I mentioned earlier is one of the Hermeticists, believe that the trend from the material to the spiritual, from the amoeba to man, I told you there's this other video, and then they mention it here, will inevitably be continued toward superior heights of love and wisdom. Now, this was written in 1997. The amoeba to man thing video that I mentioned was much later. It's much more recent. So they've been thinking this for a long time. But this trend from the material to spiritual, from the amoeba to man, will inevitably be continued towards superior heights of love and wisdom, however threatening present developments on Earth may appear to us now. Skipping down a bit, an association of scientists concerned with long-range evolution would help to sort these contradictions out and to align and attract thinkers and scientists toward a superior goal. It is urgently needed to show the pessimists that alternatives to competition until death do exist, even in non-human nature, but especially in human nature. To show the optimists that reliance on non-human determination of our fate might weaken our sense of personal responsibility for our descendants and our Earth, and to impress upon the majority the importance of a long-range and encompassing vision to guide our choices. Hello, ESG. And then they put in bold, a whole paragraph in bold. What unites us is a look at the miracle of evolution from a cosmic perspective. A Gnostic perspective, guys. It is the effort to prevent our species from becoming another dead end bypassed by ongoing development of life. It is a search for principles and values guiding humanity toward further ascent. So we got to spiritually evolve the entire species. And what in the world is this based on? Where did they get these crazy ideas about, oh no, everything's going to be bad, we're going to destroy ourselves? Every civilization of our kind at our level of advancement or whatever destroys itself. And I mean on a planetary sense. I don't mean like the fall of Rome. I mean like everybody goes extinct. The whole thing falls apart. So what is this all based on, aside from some weird book that they do mention of questionable worth about cosmic evolution and some quote from a space scientist. The book about cosmic evolution, by the way, is taken to be the impetus for what I just read. But it turns out that underneath all this are the neo-Malthusian ideas of the Club of Rome and the limits to growth. Do you remember when I talked about the limits to growth and how these guys thought that the world was going to outstrip the humans were going to outstrip the world's resources, and we would all have a population collapse? And the whole degrowth premise, the whole depopulation premise that we have to keep putting on the table is all because they believe what was written in the Club of Rome in 1971 or 2, in the book that they published, Limits to Growth, which turned out to make lots of predictions for the year 2000 that were all wrong. Turns out that's their inspiration. Here's what they write. Professor D.H. Meadows from the United States is a system analyst and journalist. Professor of Systems Management D.L. Meadows from the U.S. is director of the Institute for Policy and Social Science Research. And Professor J. Randers is a policy analyst and president emeritus of the Norwegian School of Management, chairman of the Norwegian Bank of Industry, Norwegian Institute for Market Research, and deputy director general of the World Wildlife Fund, which, by the way, is... If you didn't know, the World Wildlife Fund is really part of this whole global agenda big time. Well, it is. And here's why. In fact, it was probably created as such. I don't know for sure. All three authors collaborated on the path-breaking book, The Limits to Growth, published 20 years ago. Their present book, Beyond the Limits, from 1992, also provides such clear, convincing, and well-documented information about our present world and the dangers of rapid, uncontrolled growth that it is difficult to imagine how it could fail to have an immense impact. Growth is defined as material resource-consuming advance only, while all other growth is called development. The authors, however, see no indication that people are reasonable enough to reverse their lifestyles in time. Once overshoot becomes evident, moreover, in most cases, it will be too late once depletion is clearly visible. So these people are going to save the world from itself in line with the Limits to Growth Club of Rome stuff. And remember, the World Economic Forum guys, Klaus Schwab in particular, invited these exact same people from the Club of Rome to speak at the World Economic Forum in its second year of existing, way back in the 1970s. So this is the idea behind almost all of this. So almost all crackpot faiths and real faiths both present two alternatives, heaven and hell. We know what that looks like in Christianity, for example. Well, we can also see what it looks like from Herbert Marcuse. He says that we're either going to have communism or liberation, I should say, or we're going to have fascism. So we have heaven or hell. Those are our two choices. And here, the evolutionary new thought, Gnostic new thought of the United Nations, which is rooted down in this idea of sustainability and inclusion, presents us heaven and hell. We're either going to degrow to a utopian circular economy intentionally and intelligently under their global management with their new global faith, heaven, or what we're going to do is we're going to collapse our world. We're going to have massive depletion that becomes a vicious circle that destroys the capacity for life on the planet, and then we all die. So it's the same structure. So that's that crazy setup. But let's skip down a little further, read idea 1433, which he wrote the 13th of June, 1998. He says, we urgently need, as we enter a new century and millennium, a world conference to appraise the present state of evolution on this planet and to provide worldviews on future evolution in the next century and millennium. After humanism, after the environment, after the earth, now future evolution has become priority number one. Idea 1499, 18 August 1998. After communism and capitalism, frugalism, which is degrowth, they just didn't have the word to use in 98. After communism and capitalism, frugalism might become the new ideology and rule of our behavior on Earth, demanding from us more frugal and simple lives in order not to destroy life-giving nature. A new economic system must be born, which will not produce colossal waste, unnecessary products, built-in rapid obsolescence, and colossal duplications between 185 nations. That's exactly the argument of Herbert Marcuse in One Dimensional Man. Frugalism and simplicity of life might become the salvation of the earth and future generations. It's also the argument of the degrowth capitalism or degrowth communism book, Marx and the Anthropocene, that I covered in another episode of the podcast. This is their agenda. This is how they think. So degrowth is going to be the way to save the world. Idea 1510, 29th August 1998. We must deeply rethink our world's and humanity's future. It would be good to remember the fathers of the U.S. Constitution. How dare you? It would be good to remember the fathers of the U.S. Constitution who believed that the function of good government was to, quote, affect the greatest happiness of the greatest number of citizens and to effect harmony between the public and private interests, end quote. Today, they would add, get their motherfucking names out of your mouth. Today, they would add harmony with the earth and a worldwide dimension to the attaining of happiness. No, they wouldn't. You dickhead. Idea 1557, 15th October 1998. Speaking of identities, we should accept happily that we have a poly-identity. Our specific individual identity, a family identity, a local identity, a provincial identity, a national identity, a continental identity, a world identity, a cosmic identity, an eternal identity. The future Earth and human government of this planet should take all of these diverse identities into account. It gets much worse in the next section, based on ideas 1601 to 1700. This is where, New Genesis was pretty crazy and totally blasphemous. This is where the ideas actually get nut job, because it's his cosmological vision of the future. And I'm going to try to I have to read a lot of it, and I'll try to just kind of slide through it as quickly as we can. This is Robert Mueller, I will try to condense briefly my thoughts on a cosmic vision of humanity's future. First of all, the most important factor determining our time is that in the entire human evolution on this planet, within the last couple of centuries, and especially during the last 50 years, the human race has been able to extend its knowledge of this planet and of itself in such incredible ways that a profound transformation has taken place in evolution. This is the talk of eugenicists, guys. We now understand the mysteries of life, the mysteries of humans, the mysteries of the planet and the cosmos, and now we can direct it because we understand it. We can take it into our hands. We can seize the means of production of man. He says this knowledge has meant incredible benefits for humanity. And I skip his big laundry list of them. The fundamental fact that we know our planet, that we know humanity, that we know how to analyze and recompose matter has produced miracles. Of course, we believed that the progress of science and technology was for the benefit of humanity. In other words, that our reason for being on this planet was to get the best for ourselves. This is the great humanistic age in which we are now living. But we did not know that these great advances would also result in a whole series of crises due to our global ignorance. Whoever thought of saving energy? Whoever thought of the ozonosphere? Whoever thought of possible climatic changes? Whoever thought of the long-term genetic dangers of nuclear radiation and radio waves? I am asking this question today. What are the things we are doing today which we think are wonderful and in which in 20 years from now will have the same or worse adverse effects as a few examples I mentioned? Who is thinking of this? Who is heeding the Iroquois precept that we should think of the effects on the seventh generation? We do not even think of the next generation. There is not a single ministry of the future on this planet. Yikes. And I will point out that he actually, in lots and lots and lots of the ideas, invokes the idea that we need to go back to indigenous, especially American Indian knowledges and epistemologies. That comes up over and over and over again. I don't actually include any of them, I think, except for that mention. But it's not like a throw-in here. It's like over and over and over again. Indigenous knowledges are the only way. Why? Because they are the model for communism. Remember Marx's model of communism. Communism is a global state where we all act like a big tribal family. That's why. Now, skipping down some of this so we can get to the crazy stuff. Of late, there has been another fundamental change on Earth. Until now, we thought that this planet was at our disposal, that it was created for us. Uh-oh, Christians, there's your beliefs. That it was here for us to exploit and develop endlessly. I think the word in the Bible is subdue. Well, we are now in the middle of another Copernican revolution. We thought at the time that the sun was turning around the earth until we learned from Copernicus that it was not true. Now we're learning that perhaps this planet has not been created for humans, but that humans have been created for the planet. Uh-oh, there's your earth-worshipping Gnostic Theosophy. We return to the earth, he says, as our American Indians and the great religions have all told us. Thus, we are temporary living manifestations or incarnations of this earth. Again, the American Indians tell us we are children of the earth and we must take good care of our mother and respect her. We are living earth. Each of us is a cell, a perceptive, nervous, active unit of the earth. We are earth alive and are beginning to be concerned about the earth. The living consciousness of the earth is beginning to operate through us. All over the world, a kind of earth democracy, a Gaia-ocracy, is taking shape. What you're witnessing is the birth of a new pagan cult, by the way. You, as cosmic and earth cells, are part of a vast biological and evolutionary phenomenon which is of first importance at this stage, namely humanity as a whole. The whole human species is becoming the brain, the heart, the soul, the expression, and the action of the earth. Pause. Let's talk about Karl Marx, right? Remember when he said that the earth is man's inorganic body, and that the point of part of our activity is that as we rehumanize ourselves, we are to humanize the world and make the world fit for human habitation. So we're supposed to turn the earth, we're supposed to basically integrate the earth into ourselves and ourselves into the earth so that we're one symbiotic thing, and that would of course avoid the metabolic rift that capitalism is going to produce, and the whole point of degrowth, which is the whole point of the concepts of the Club of Rome that I just talked about, and limits to growth. So the whole human species as a species being, namely humanity as a whole, the whole human species as a species being, is becoming the brain, the heart, the soul, the expression, and the action of the earth. We now have a global brain which determines what can be dangerous or mortal for this planet. Yeah, in Limits to Growth, it was shitty computer models that he literally talks about. It's like the shitty computer models of COVID. But go back to like 1971 and imagine how shitty those computer models would be. Because that's what it literally, that's their global brain, is shitty computer models. But what that means is AI as a future global brain. And it can determine what can be dangerous or mortal for this planet. The United Nations, what does he say? There's a colon here. What is the global brain, according to Robert Mueller, writing in 1998? We have a global brain which determines what can be dangerous or mortal for this planet. And it is the United Nations and its agencies, the innumerable groups and networks around the world are part of this brain. We are a world heart. Altruism, which we haven't covered altruism in Auguste Comte yet, but that's another bad philosophy. Altruism, the concern of people to be of help, the live aid and international programs, etc. All of this is a manifestation of the fact that on this planet, after having evolved from protozoas to metazoas, we are now becoming what one would call pterozoas. We are living Earth that is beginning to be conscious of its role in the evolution of this particular planet in the universe. This is our newly discovered meaning, birth of a cult. It is happening every day, and we have to draw the right conclusions from it. The world is changing very fundamentally in terms of consciousness, behavior, and action. We know that we are a global family living in a global home. This is more or less where we stand. In other words, we are in the process of becoming a global civilization, and yet this is not all. There is more to come. Beyond our global consciousness, we are moving into a cosmic consciousness. Remember, this is the guy that created Common Core, just in case you forgot that. In other words, we learn to see the Earth process not only as a global planetary process, but as a cosmic manifestation and evolution on a given planet in the universe. It is not impossible that the universe has not been able to produce many live planets like ours. We're at the right distance from a sun. We have the right mass to retain an atmosphere and water, and we are very lucky that the force that keeps atoms together on this planet is just right. A little stronger, and we would be a condensed ball. A little weaker, and we would be dispersed into the universe. I hate to point out creationists, but he's making the same argument you guys do. Our planet and its life forms are the result of many miracles and unique phenomena. The religions rightly say that this is a unique planet and that God has a special design for us. Science is now discovering that too. Mathematicians tell us that the conditions required to give birth to life on any planet in the universe are one of the most staggering astronomical improbability figures they can conceive. New cosmologies are being produced by the dozens, but I do not think that anyone is as yet the right one. There are many different views. The physicists, the geneticists, the chemists, the spiritualists each have a view. Which one of those is not like the others? The idiots. I mean, spiritualists. That's right. The Theosophists. When I put your little dig there a second ago, Christians, that this sounds exactly like you guys making your creation arguments. I told you the fundamental spiritual battle is theology versus, that's you, versus theosophy, that's them. And they are stepping into the exact same space at the same time as you guys to try to make these claims and to bring people into their cult rather than keeping them in either reason or faith. He says, but it shows that there is an active search for a new cosmology, for a new understanding of what is happening on this planet where there are many life forms and where one of them, namely the human form, humans, remember he said before protozoan, metazoan, and then pterozoan? Okay, humans are becoming cosmozoas, the main factor of the further evolution, transformation, and possibly destruction of the planet if we do not understand what is going on and act properly. You're witnessing the birth of a cult religion. This is something, he says, absolutely extraordinary because it means that each of us is a cosmic unit. Sounds like Deepak Chopra, right? He's one of them. That we have the ingredients of the total cosmos in ourselves. You only know who Deepak Chopra is, by the way, because they elevated Deepak Chopra because they needed somebody to go talk about this and have debates and become very famous pushing these ideas into the public. How many times was he on Oprah? Oh, shit, lots. The cosmos is giving birth to billions of humans as seeds. Uh-oh. The cosmos is giving birth to billions of humans as seeds. Many seeds fall on stone or on infertile ground or do not understand what their duties are. But growing numbers of people understand that they have a cosmic function deep in themselves. See, only some people are actually Gnostics, and they know that they're going to have to direct the spiritual evolution of the entire human society, or the entire human species, and the planet itself, and cosmic evolution. These people are esoteric theosophists. He says, if you look over history, who are the greatest people? You will find the Mozarts, the Beethovens, the philosophers, the sages, the religious leaders. They were all people of cosmic consciousness. Oh, all the geniuses were people like my cult. Of course they try to claim all the people in history like they always do. They were conscious of living in the cosmos, in eternity, and in the universe at every moment. Really? Mozart was? Like, fucking really? I don't think so. Isn't this like, you say the sages and the religious leaders, isn't this like kind of fucking exactly what Elijah was like? No. Wrong. Certainly Irenaeus, one of the greats, cast down these heresies in the first century. He says, this is why we listen to them. Well, because they're in the cult. You know, they're all like hundreds of years ago before your stupid cult, but they were in the cult. And this is why we listen to them, because they're part of the cult. They're a vibration. He doesn't say this, I'm saying this. A vibration of the Prisca Theologia, the universal religion. This is why we listen to them, he says. When we read them, when we see their works, we are deeply moved and elevated. Why? Because they are in tune with the universe and make us feel that way. This is what the religions are trying to sell us. Quote, be in tune with the universe, be in union with God, with eternity. Remember that your temporary lives have a meaning, a duty to fulfill, end quote. And when we fulfill this duty, the universe recompenses us with a happiness and possibly even resurrection. It is not impossible that the Hindu philosophy might be right, that only those who had worthwhile lives contributing to the good in the further evolution of this planet will be allowed to live again, and that worthless seeds will be left aside to wither away. The religions can be very helpful in understanding these new cosmologies. Let me just pause for a second. Holy shit. Okay. In other words, he says, humanity, the same way as it has become recently a global family, is also becoming now a cosmic family. This is the United Nations, gentlemen. We will realize that we are a cosmic species which will find its way on this planet only by following the immanent rules of the cosmos. I'm sure, ladies, that they alone know those rules. And they're going to enforce them through one government, one global government, through the United Nations. Some call it God. Others a cosmic substratum that is in each of us as the manifestation of the living universe divided and distributed over all reality. Well, there's the fundamental Hermetic belief. It is possible that stars are just living and dying cells of one body the same way as we are living and dying cells of that same body. Let me pause again. Holy shit. This realization is of incredible momentous importance. It will occupy humanity and give us great hope and challenges. The story was told to us in simple forms by the religions, but now the scientists have come to the same conclusion, that the universe is one in its endless manifestations. The recent scientific literature is replete with this finding. So the Gnostics know the secret interpretation of whatever it is he's talking about, and it's whatever they think. My proposal, he says, is therefore that we proceed toward the year 2000. Sorry, I left out the word as. My proposal is therefore that as we proceed toward the year 2000, we should pack this last decade with visions, dreams, ideas, and actions aimed at preparing the next millennium as the cosmic spiritual millennium of this planet, in order to properly respond to the expectations of the cosmos or God. In order to do this, I will propose that a number of major conferences or efforts be undertaken which are not yet considered by the United Nations. Peace, disarmament, population, the environment, economic development, etc. are all subjects being dealt with in the UN. But here is a list of others which should be taken up in order to prepare adequately the next millennium. So he's about to give a list of suggestions that the United Nations needs to take up that it's not successfully taking up, even though overpopulation and the environment are already part of the plan. How many suggestions do you think he makes? How many? It's 17. Of course it's 17. Of course it's 17. First, a major conference should be convened on a new cosmology. We just heard what that sounds like. One should listen to the physicists, to the biologists, to the other scientists, and to people who have come up with new cosmologies. That's the weirdo spiritualists, like them. From their views, one would extract a common denominator, a prisca theologia. They all have very important perceptions, but these perceptions vary with the point of view of their professions: physical, biological, spiritual, social, political, etc. At the end of such a conference, we would have a better understanding of what the cosmos is expecting from us in our next phase of evolution. Second, I would recommend a major conference on a new philosophy, a global philosophy. Philosophy is the way of life. What should be the way of life on this planet in global terms in light of our fantastic knowledge? Where are the great sages of our time? Where are the positive philosophies who are giving us an explanation of the meaning of life and hope for the future? I'll tell you where the great sages are. You're censoring them. That's where they are. Third, a new sociology is needed which will help us understand the meaning and role of all the innumerable groups, entities, professions, and institutions we have on this planet. Most of them have a contribution to make to the progress and success of our evolution. Many of them do not know it and have not even asked the fundamental, deeper question of why they exist, why they were created, what their ultimate purpose and contribution should be in the total human fabric. Their limited aims and behaviors must be geared toward the needs of humanity, of the planet, and to the continued success of our cosmic evolution. This is a vast, unexplored, urgent subject. Fourth, we need a new anthropology, as Margaret Mead recommended. Remember, that's the mother of cultural relativism. We need world celebrations as we have them in the family and religions in nations. Humans in the world have to develop common paradigms, common ideals, and benchmarks for the future. The science of the total human race leaves much to be desired. We do more research on tribal systems than on global humanity, its meaning, evolution, and system. So we need a science of humanity, apparently. Fifth, we need an overall human biology. I wonder if it knows what a woman is. A science of human life on this planet. We study more animals and microbes than we study the functioning of the human species. To the biologist, this is political. It should not be so. The biologist should tell us very frankly and honestly how the human species functions from their point of view as experts in life. If they do it for the fishes and the mammals, they can and should also do it for the human species. Well, they're biologists, so maybe they do know what a woman is, but it doesn't appear to be the case. Sixth, we need a global cosmic spirituality. We have heard religious leaders of various faiths. It was illuminating. I hope that religious leaders will get together and define before the end of this century the cosmic laws which are common to all their faiths. So there's a great ecumenical movement. And imagine if you tied that thing through the church to the businesses and called it a Center for Inclusive Capitalism. They have been cosmic experts and interpreters of the heavens for a long time. They should tell the politicians what the cosmic laws are, what God or the gods or the cosmos are expecting from humans. It's good that we had last year the Oxford Conference of Parliamentarians, Scientists, and Religious Leaders, and that in January 1990 a second conference will be held in Moscow. We must hope also that the Pope will come before the year 2000 to the United Nations, speak for all the religions and spiritualists on the planet, and give the world the religious view of how the third millennium should be a spiritual millennium, a millennium in which we will see the integration and harmony of humanity with creation, with nature, with the planet, with the heavens, and with eternity. Yeah, let the integralists do it. Their system is an integralist system, by the way, just pointing that out. Seventh, we need a new world policy and political system. This planet is mismanaged to an incredible degree. If the United States were managed like the world is managed, it would be a disaster. Nobody would understand how 50 states and the world has 185, each having a president, a flag, an army, and absolute sovereignty, could ever work together. Imagine the United States government in Washington being only a kind of United Nations without any authority, any legislative power, barely any resources. You mean kind of like the Founding Fathers thought it would be? It would be a disaster. Well, we have this disaster for the world, and it is about time we recognize it. Ken Keyes, I think that's how you say his name, excellent book Planethood, makes this point and offers a way for the political reform of this planet. The birth of the European Union, which was seen by Jean Monnet and Robert Schuman as the first step toward a world union, is the biggest harbinger of hope. How's that going for you now, fuckers? Eighth, we need a proper planetary management. Private firms and the multinationals must face up to their responsibilities for the management of the planet. Oh, ESG. They consider themselves responsible only to profits and stockholders. Well, it's becoming increasingly manifest that this planet was not created for the purpose of making money. We urgently need a science, a strategy, and a methodology of proper management of planet Earth. There's ESG right there. And there is these big investment firms taking control of all of the private firms and multinationals for their responsibilities for the management of the planet, environmental, social, and governance. Ninth, we need a new world philanthropy. People are giving their wealth and monies to a hospital, to a local university, to a national foundation or purpose, and the world gets little or nothing. The University for Peace here in demilitarized Costa Rica is one of the most beautiful and useful projects on the earth. But where are the philanthropists who are taking an interest in it, with the exception of one or two? So he's not getting enough money for his own little stupid project. And yet, it is here in this university where a new science of peace must be developed for this planet. Maybe we don't want that shit, dude. And thousands of peacemakers educated for a whole series of professions. Oh, great, more infiltration. The people have to take the financing of the world's care into their own hands. In other words, you taking it literally into your own hands and giving your money where you want is not adequate. So it's going to have to be channeled to what they want. So philanthropy is going to have to be globally coordinated to go to UN designated things. Got you. We do not even have an intergovernmental world budget. Well, if governments do not want to have a world budget, let the philanthropists and the people do it in their own way. A new world democracy will thus be born. 10th, we need a new world education, SDG 4. Global education, namely in the education of children in our global home and into the human family, is making good progress. But we have to go beyond. We need the cosmic education foreseen by the religious and by people like Maria Montessori. We need a holistic education teaching the holism of the universe and the planet. I am glad that one of the first graduates of the Robert Mueller School in Arlington, Texas, which teaches my World Core curriculum, will take the floor during this conference to announce the creation of a United Nations of Youth. How beautiful. So the guy who created Common Core says we need a new world global education. What's it going to focus on? Well, we now know, and I'll do a podcast on this sooner or later, the UN's idea of global citizenship and global citizenship education. 11th, we need a new world information. Outer space inspectors would be shocked by the wrong information that is being spread around the world. We got to manage misinformation and disinformation. We need honest, objective, truthful information to guide our way and behavior and not manipulate information for all kinds of purposes. Iron law of woke projection never misses, as we've now learned. Proper world information, communications, and media are another subject of paramount importance. The United Nations and its 32 specialized agencies and world programs come closest to what such an information system should be. 12th, we need a new world ethics. What is good for the United States, Russia, or any other country, like having atomic bombs, and there are 40,000 in the world, can be awfully bad for our planet. I'm sure that God, or the cosmos, has not created this planet to have all these nuclear detonators in its flesh, in its water, in its air, and in the stars. Okay, I just have to stop there for a second. We haven't put any fucking nuclear weapons in any stars, and stars are literally gigantic nuclear explosions of such vast proportions that we can't contemplate them. So if God made the stars, he did want nuclear fucking detonations in the stars. This guy is lost my temper. I'm sick of these crackpots. I really don't like these people. Anyway, and in the stars. What are you adding that for, you frickin' moron? God. Our political leaders must be given to understand that they do not only have a responsibility toward their people and toward humanity, but toward the success of the extraordinary cosmic process. By the way, dude, the primary energy source of the extraordinary cosmic process is nuclear detonations in the stars. Perhaps unique in the whole universe unfolding on this planet. They might finish it, or they might help and foster it. I know we kind of lost the plot on that one. New world ethics. So we've all got to have this new world global ethical system that's facilitated through their occult theosophical religion that's focused on a Gaiaocracy. 13th, and we remember that 13 is the magical number of power in their numerology. Just like 17 is the magical number of one completed turn of transformation, 13 is the power to turn that transformative wheel. So what do they say is 13th? What does he say, Robert Mueller? We need a new world science and technology. The scientists and the technologists must assume a cosmic responsibility. What they are doing might be right or wrong for humanity and for our further evolution. They have to think of the 7th generation and should place Oren Lyon's prayer on their desk. And I do not know what that refers to, but apparently it's written down in Idea 899, which is, I don't think, in this document. 14th, we need a new world economy. Oikos nomos means the management of the home. At long last, we recognize that planet Earth is our home. We need a world economy in which all people have decent cosmic lives and perform the functions for which they were born. Sounds exactly like George Soros' idea of an open society, or Herbert Marcuse's idea of a liberated society, or Marx's idea of a completed communism. It goes far beyond the new international economic order. It is a restructuring of the economy based on the ecology, oikos logos. and the knowledge of our planet. We have to put our house, which is on the planet, in good evolutionary order to become a planet of extraordinary beauty, conservation, renewal, happiness, and justice for all. So we need an entire new world economy. I bet you it's going to work like Agenda 30 by 30, where by the year 2030, that's the by 30 part, 30% of the world will be uninhabited and back to the wild and not used for any commercial or productive purpose. 15th, we need a new world art. See the table framework for the planetary cosmic role of art in culture. I love the way they talk. The planetary cosmic role of art. We need a renaissance of art similar to the Italian Renaissance, which put things into harmony again. Modern art was the expression of our analytical period. We dissected everything. We now know it was probably propped up by crackpots who wanted to put ugly crap in front of us to demoralize us, frankly. Art has to be paid for. We now have to put everything into harmony again. We need a holistic, universal art expressing our faith, sense of beauty, happiness, and planetary, humanistic, cosmic consciousness, as all great poets, writers, painters, musicians, and sculptors have done in the past. The classic book by Richard Burke on cosmic consciousness gives us a whole list of such people. We also need world anthems like the one we heard this morning. Some of the sanguinary, violent national anthems need to be rewritten. I think that might include the national anthem of the United States, the Star-Spangled Banner, which is a very interesting national anthem because it's actually not about a war. A lot of people think it's about happening within a war. The first stanza of the Star-Spangled Banner is a question. Is our flag still there? Are we still going to make it? We have a long, dangerous, perilous night in this war for our independence, attacking us to establish this new nation of ideals and human liberty. And is it still there? That's the whole point. But I bet you that that's part of it. He says, I have a new text of the Marseillaise written by young people, which starts with the words, Aliens enfants de la planète, come children of the planet. Why not? It is beautiful. I hope that the young people in Strasbourg will sing it on the occasion of the 200th anniversary of the French Revolution. Several national anthems have similarly been rewritten by young people. I have a whole file of them. That's great. No. 16th, we need a new world psychology. Does it know what a woman is? We must learn how to love our wonderful earth and miraculous humanity above anything else. Now we are being taught to love a nation or a group or a religion and to kill other human beings, other divine beings, for them. Well, not really. I mean, some do that, but there is this whole just war concept where you get to defend yourself if people attack you or try to steal your stuff. I mean, there's a thing. This is contrary to nature and to cosmic divine laws. We have to love humanity. We have to love the planet. We have to love the universe and have to be their instruments during our short years on this earth. If we do not, life on this planet will come to an end. A completely new world psychology must lay down our right sentimental priorities. This is what Freud told Einstein, see Idea 1020, in their famous exchange of views. 17th. And he starts this way, and this is very significant. 17th but not last. Let me tell you real quick. There's no 18. So it is 17th but last. But he insists 17th but not last. Why? Because it's a cycle of evolution. 17 steps to turn history once. And then there will be 17 more steps to turn history again, another revolution. Revolutions in 17 steps. Marx identified 17 contradictions in capitalism. Paulo Freire said that it takes 17 generative themes to radicalize or conscientize a learner. The Corpus Hermeticum has 17 books. I'm not going to get into the spiral of Theodorus and where this comes from the Pythagorean mathematical numbers cult, but that's ultimately what it is. 17th but not last, we must teach the children of this planet a new art of living. Show them how great life is. How's that going for you guys? How's your comprehensive sexuality education working out for their precious little minds? It's killing them. We should teach them how thankful they should be to live today at this time of magnificent consciousness and the incredible knowledge of the universe, that it will be their role to be the right managers of the planet, that each of them is a cosmic unit, or as Pablo Casals said, quote, a true miracle, a potential Leonardo or Beethoven. Therefore, you cannot hurt, you cannot kill another miracle, end quote. How's that working out, guys? How are your things working out for that? Seems like you're lying. Yes, we are miracles, microcosms, cosmozoas of the universe. This must be taught to children so that they can flower to the responsibility for which they were born. In other words, global citizenship education, which is defined literally in terms of teaching them to meet the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations Agenda 2030. We also have to teach frugality, the degrowth, and simple living in order not to destroy or tax unduly the beautiful creation of God. We should follow in the footsteps of St. Francis, who preached this 800 years ago. We should read Voluntary Simplicity by Dwayne Elgin. Simple, frugal lives of 5 billion people are the most monumental contribution to the environment of this planet. Every human being should know that he or she is an instrument of God or the universe, be it as a mother who gives life to a child as a new divine being, or as a father who in the family is raising a new cosmic unit, or an educator who is educating new cosmogens, or a doctor who will heal cosmic patients, or public servants, or artists, etc. There's 17. Then we will fully validate life and make children and people proud to be alive. How's that going for you guys? We gave you guys a 20-year run on that. How's it going? Is that working? Is that what's happening? Then humans will respect their own miraculous divine cosmicity, as Buckminster Fuller said when he was offered cigarettes. Quote, I will never do anything that might impair the functioning of the perfect cosmic unit I have been given by the universe. End quote. This is a language which we should hold to children. This would be the real fight against drugs, alcohol, and violent television and literature. How's that working out? You do not damage your incredible cosmic entity by introducing poisonous materials and images into its functioning. Can we talk about books like Genderqueer, guys? Which is part of your comprehensive sexuality education stuff. Can we talk about what you're actually doing? We can validate life to an unprecedented degree and extend it to the largest and smallest manifestations of the universe. This should be the philosophy of the next century. I would like to conclude by saying that perhaps we should replace the popular recent saying, quote, think globally, act locally, by think cosmically, act locally wherever you live on this miraculous planet. Thank you very much for giving me some of your precious cosmic time. Doesn't it just make you want to punch this guy in the head? Idea 1633. So now we elaborate on this. 29 December 1998. The word politics should be abolished and replaced by something much deeper. I like planetics, the management of our planet. But it's even deeper than that. What is happening on our Earth is a whole series of fundamental biological evolutionary changes. We need to consider the biology and evolution of the Earth in its entirety. This should be the only concern of government. They have to manage the entire Earth. The collective preoccupations of humanity should be for the state of the planet and the conditions and future of all life on it. The word politics must be abandoned. Politicians should become earth biologists, and all faculties of political science, faculties of earth biology and evolution. You getting the idea that the United Nations sucks in a big way? Idea 1634, 30 December 1998. Human history proves that there are always very great barriers, obstacles to a peaceful, just, and harmonious world. In the past, it was feudality, then the kingdoms and the empires. Today, it is nationalism, and tomorrow it will be the big multinational companies. It is a mistake to hope that these barriers will disappear by themselves. All human history proves that they have to be dismantled in order to be replaced by something else. We have reached that point of modern history where both nationalisms and big multinational corporations must be dismantled and replaced by something else. It has to come from an outside force, a people's revolution. That means a communist revolution, guys. Or a revolution of the scientists, thinkers, visionaries, prophets, globalists, futurologists, and synthesizers of this planet. So there you have the global agenda. We have to get rid of nationalisms and start thinking in terms of global citizenship. And there you have ESG. Big multinational corporations are dismantled. None of them can do what they want on their own. They are all owned by one another and act in monopoly trust. They are not what they were before. They are dismantled and replaced by something else that works in line with ESG and United Nations agendas. Why are so many companies so hellbent to achieve their Agenda 2030 net zero targets? Because they've been dismantled and replaced by something else. It's not multinational corporations even, which are their own set of problems. They are monopoly trusts that act in the interest of the United Nations agenda. Idea 1708. Regarding globalization, one could take my World Core curriculum, see Volume 1, and envisions the globalization and futurization of every segment of it. An individual can globalize himself. Families can globalize themselves. States, province, departments, that is, local levels of government, could globalize themselves by creating world associations for local communities, states, provinces, etc. It would be of benefit to them to learn how other subdivisions like theirs are governed, legislated, and administered elsewhere in the world. It would be an incredibly rich, reciprocal experience. So that's the idea of global citizenship, which is to be implemented on every single level. It kind of takes the idea of subsidiarity and turns it inside out and on its head. Yeah, the local stuff is all going to work. As much authority as possible is going to be put into local hands, but they are all going to have to be transformed to only do the big global, or I guess cosmic agenda that's coordinated through the central coordinating and cooperation facilities of the United Nations and its New World Religion. So if you get everybody in the New World Religion, you can tell them that they manage their own affairs as maximally as possible, but it's because they all follow the same religion. So that's why it's so important for them to take over and transform all the faiths into one corrupt global faith. And that's why this isn't, like, if you don't understand that this occult theosophy is in fact a cult religion, a global cult religion startup, then you're missing the entire point. Idea 1745. On the occasion of the year 2000, governments and the diplomatic community should pay attention to the proposals for a better United Nations offered by Harold Stassen, one of the world's last living members who signed the Charter. He sees the United Nations change from a place where meetings on political, economic, and social issues are held into a creative center where ideas on religion and philosophy are exchanged for a better future. Among his proposals are a central cabinet of administrators, a universal environmental institute, a United Nations Legion, an inspection corps, a world panel of mediators, a world board of arbitration, a world court of equity, a worldwide conference on religions, and a research institute of people and government. His book should be read by every delegate to the United Nations, by every head of state before coming to the year 2000 General Assembly, and in all political science faculties of universities throughout the world. So, yeah, they're kind of after, like, everything. So you've now got a taste of how crazy it is. And those 17 points and the whole New Genesis were the real big points. This is your United Nations. So I'm going to close by reading 3 more of these ideas, and that's it. But I wanted you to have a sense that the United Nations is not what you think it is. The United Nations, well, you might think this if you're one of my followers, but generally speaking, people don't realize what the United Nations is. The United Nations is a organization that is wholly dedicated to global governance under an occult theosophical religion. And if we don't understand what we're dealing with, we're going to completely misunderstand what we need to be doing. The United States, it said, needs to decline. Because why? Because we're not in alignment, or we can be not in alignment with their program. This is why they freaked out when Trump took office. Trump actually pulled us back from all of this. He removed us from UNESCO. They know that he was going to put America's interests ahead of their theosophy, and that was why they have to attack the United States so vigorously, and that's why they do attack the United States so vigorously, because the United States is in its fully constituted form, and its constitution at its heart is the biggest threat to this cult religion trying to take over the world that there is. But I'll close with, like I said, 3 more of these ideas, so we don't drag this out. Idea number 562, 25th January 1996. Last but not least, Humanity has reached a point when we must consider our human presence, past, present, and future on this particular planet in the universe. We now have a tremendous information. That's what it says. Sorry, I didn't read it right. We now have a tremendous information on the universe in which we live. In addition to our total consciousness of our Earth and its global evolution, we are now also acquiring and developing a cosmic consciousness of the universe. This is the greatest of all our advances in human history. So their cult is. But the mysteries of infinity and eternity still escape us and will remain outside of human and scientific grasp. This has the result of bringing together the spirituality or basic faiths of all religions and science. Faiths, by the way, is in scare quotes. This says this as a result of bringing together the spirituality or basic, quote, faiths of all religion and science. God, the gods, or the Great Spirit, or spirits, or their emissaries, prophets, and human incarnations like Jesus, gave humanity its early stages of a cosmic universal, all-encompassing faith or feeling for the mysteries of the cosmos, for the norms of love, and for the miracle of life and norms of behavior between all humans and with all other species in nature. That's claiming an awful lot. These messages, or, quote, revelations, should not be neglected. They probably something should happen to them, like them being transcended. They contain some of the profoundest answers to human behavior, fulfillment, and survival. Great was our astonishment in the environmental crisis to discover the wisdom and rules of behavior toward nature dictated by the Great Spirit to the indigenous people of this planet. The world's 5,000 religions are filled with incredible wisdom regarding human morality, belief in life, environmental adaptation, survival, and future evolution. This is strongly coming to the fore at this time as manifested in the following. But let me pause before we talk about the following, because I want to go back to the Jesus part here. So God, the gods, or the Great Spirit, or spirits, and their emissaries, prophets, and human incarnations like Jesus. So all of these characters, Jesus is just one of many. Jesus is just another Buddha who gave humanity at its early stages a cosmic consciousness. So this is the rise. You've heard this phrase recently, probably, if you're too tapped in on social media. This is the rise, and this is part of the New Thought movement that this is all into. This is the rise of the idea of the Christ consciousness. And of course, the Christ consciousness is the awakened cosmic consciousness this guy's talking about. And this Christ consciousness was supposed to be embodied by Jesus and many of the other great sages and Buddhas of history, and also the gurus or the shamans or whatever else. But Christ consciousness is a counterfeit. It is not at all biblical. It is a heretical, theosophical idea, and it is actually on the rise again. And you need to be sensitive to seeing that, because the battle at a spiritual level, the spiritual battle we're engaged in, is theology versus theosophy. Jesus didn't stutter. He didn't say there's a bunch of us that are like me. He didn't say that. He said, he is the way, the truth, and the life. He said, the way is straight and narrow. The path of many is the path of destruction. He was very clear about what's going on. He said to follow the law. Which law was he talking about? The law of the universe? No. He claims, or the Gospel of John claims, that he is the Logos itself made flesh. So he is, in addition to whatever else on a more profound spiritual level, he is literally the embodiment of truth. This is not what's being presented. This is a Gnostic counterfeit of that. So the Gnostic New Thought movement is embodied. If you you can listen to like people like Deepak Chopra and all these guys that are their mouthpieces. Look up the phrase Christ consciousness and see what comes up. I haven't done it, but I'm so confident that what you're going to find is crazy theosophical stuff that I'm not worried telling you to do it. Okay, so all of this is in our next stages of evolution is strongly coming to the fore at this time, he said, has manifested in the following. 1. The dream and plan of my compatriot Robert Schumann from Alsace-Lorraine to see the European Union, which started with a coal and steel community, followed by an economic community, followed by a political union, culminate in an all-spiritual European Union, including the Eastern European countries, especially Holy Mother Russia. Let that one sink in. 2, the creation in 85 countries, including as a third party in the United States, of the Natural Law Party, based on the premise that the laws of nature should guide humans in their political behavior and organization. There is only one step to recognize that natural laws are in reality cosmic laws. So they're going to take the concept of natural law, pervert it if they were to get their way with this, and then say that that's a step in their cosmic evolution. It's the same Gnostic thing I talked about in the past where they say, yeah, the thing you've got, that's really wise. And that's also step like 4 out of 10. Come with us, I've got the other 6. And cosmic, astral, blah, blah, blah is coming down the pike, and only they secretly understand it. 3, the San Francisco, and this is the one that I really wanted to hit, the San Francisco initiative to create a United Religions organization similar to the United Nations, also born in that city, where all religions of the world could cooperate, define what they have in common, provide their wisdom on human behavior and morality, and right relations with nature and the creation of God. Which I don't know if that's a pun. I assume that it's relations with the creation of God, but maybe they mean the act of creating God. In the process, they will hopefully reduce and progressively give up their fundamentalism, in other words, actually believing their real faiths in favor of some theosophy. They will hopefully reduce and progressively give up their fundamentalism in favor of a global spirituality, the same way as nations in the United Nations have reduced the national fundamentalism called sovereignty and given away their sovereignty to the United Nations to govern their affairs from a remote, unaccountable theosophical cult that we should be getting as far away from as humanly possible. He goes on to say, may God help us that a world conference be convened on proper earth government through what the world's religions have in common in terms of universal global spirituality and worldwide human experience. In other words, a Prisca Theologia. So that was 1. Idea 1998. 20 years ago, I wrote an essay on the need for global education. Today, I would write an essay on the need for evolutionary education. Tomorrow, I would write an essay on the need for cosmic education. So I want to phrase those things in different words, and I'm just going to say the same thing. 20 years ago, I wrote an essay on the need to develop Common Core. Today, I would write an essay on the need for a social and emotional learning, and tomorrow I would write an essay on the need for global citizenship education. That's what's going on. That's who this guy is. And we did the first 2 of those, and we're working on the third. And the United Nations is actually behind all 3 of them. And it's all based in a cult theosophical religion that they're using education to bring your children into, even though it's damaging to them, even though they know that it causes severe anxiety, depression, and cognitive dissonance, that they can then use the social emotional learning techniques, which are effectively brainwashing techniques, to override in the kids. That I did that whole podcast on that document called SEL for SDGs, Social Emotional Learning for the Sustainable Development Goals. So there you go. You can read the Sustainable Development Goals as evolutionary education and global citizenship as the next step after we achieve that. Spiritual, and then which is the Common Core, and then material, and that's sustainability, and then sorry, I did it wrong. Ideal, that's the Common Core, and then material, that's the sustainable development education, and then spiritual would be global consciousness, or cosmic consciousness, I guess, which is global citizenship education. He goes on to say, after World War II, humanity acquired beyond national consciousness a global consciousness. See, it's about global citizenship education. Today, humanity is acquiring an evolutionary consciousness, a consciousness of the future. Tomorrow, humanity will acquire a cosmic consciousness. After World War II, the United Nations was born as the planet's first global organization. Today, the United Nations is becoming the planet's evolutionary organization. So it's not meant to be a facilitator of global cooperation. It's meant to direct the evolution of mankind. Tomorrow, he says, the United Nations will become the planet's first cosmic organization. This is a cult theosophical organization with humanity's transcendence into cosmic consciousness in space and in time, the sciences and religions will converge into an all-encompassing, holistic, spiritual age dreamt of by our ancestors, prophets, visionary saints, and earthly incarnations of the divine, cosmic forces over eons of time. In other words, the Prisca Theologia. Our future, he says, is incredibly bright and hopeful if we hasten these processes and think in time of ways to face very likely emergencies. Isn't that telling? So the goal is to create a one-world theosophical religion that blends all of the faiths, all the sciences, all the philosophies, all of the activities into one thing, one all-encompassing holistic spiritual age, dreamt of by all of the cosmic forces over eons of time. Wow. And we will have a bright future if we hasten toward that and prepare ourselves to face very likely emergencies, which seems to be what the World Economic Forum decided it was going to do. And what the UN subsidiary, the World Health Organization, decided to switch its mission from coordinating, various things about diseases and medicines and things like that to whatever the hell it's doing now, trying to claim sovereignty over the world, which we just heard that sovereignty was the problem that has to be overcome. National sovereignty has to be destroyed. And he said literally in similar ways to the way that we're overcoming national sovereignty to a globalist consciousness, we need to overcome individual faiths and fundamentalism to a global theosophical occult religion. And I think last but not least, idea number 1982. He says in Idea 502 in Volume 2, I listed the three main periods through which the United Nations and humanity have gone since 1945. 1, humanism. 2, the environment. And 3, the earth as number 1. In these last 500 ideas, I mentioned a fourth period, our future evolution. That's the really crazy pants part of the document, by the way, that I was reading through, was a reflection on those. Of course, these are ideas 500-ish, and those are ideas 1600-ish, so it's not identical. I'm not saying that. But that's what he actually reflects there is these 3 phases, and then the fourth one is our future evolution. So anyway, as he continues, it suddenly occurs to me that the United Nations is still structured according to the needs and philosophy of the first period, namely humanism, with the objectives of peace, well-being, health, labor, food, education, culture, human rights, etc. The structure of the United Nations system does not reflect adequately the other 3 recent and equally fundamental preoccupations except the environment. A basic restructuring of the United Nations and its specialized agencies must therefore be considered to make it the principal central organization of the Earth and future evolution. We should create a World Air and Atmosphere Agency, a World Water Agency, a World Climate Agency, a World Ocean Agency, a World Outer Space Agency, etc. Within these fundamental aspects of the Earth, we should consider the place, action, and fulfillment of the human species. This reform should become a priority on the agenda of world affairs at this beginning of a new century and millennium. And I think that's exactly what they did. That's exactly what happened. The United Nations, however bad or whatever it was in its inception at the beginning, in the 21st century, in the third millennium, became a monster. And that monster is completely imbued with a occult theosophical view of the world and of humanity and of its mission in the world. I don't think that disagrees with its foundings from the Huxleys, but just to point out, it was being said at the time that the United Nations was not making this change satisfactorily by high-level people in the United Nations. But that's what it turned to become, and that's what it has become, and that's what we're dealing with when we look at the United Nations. It is the headquarters of a world theosophical cult. It is not what it appears to be. We should have nothing to do with it. So I hope that we can start thinking about this more. I'm going to, in the notes for this episode, put a link to all 4 volumes, not just this particular document, but all 4 volumes of Robert Muller's ramblings in Robert Muller's website so that you can go look through the other, God knows how many ideas, almost 2,000 ideas yourself. I didn't even read 100 of them. So that you have a real sense of how insanely dangerous the United Nations really is. And I just want you to remember who this guy is. He was a very high-level player in the United Nations. He is the creator of something we're going to be talking more about, and I encourage you to listen to Lisa Logan about this group called the Evolutionary Leaders. These are very important people that you think you don't know about, that it's going to sound totally insane when you find out about them. So we'll probably hear more about that as we go. But he was also the creator of the Common Core curriculum, in line with trying to get exactly these corrupt values pushed into, these religious values pushed into education. I don't think Common Core succeeded. I think the primary effect Common Core had in practice was to separate the ability for parents to help their children do homework and thus disconnect them so that the children became more reliant on the teachers. And as we've moved into social and emotional learning and global citizenship education and education for sustainable development, they've been able to take advantage of that broken chain from parent to child and take the children in this other direction. In other words, indoctrinating them into this theosophical cult of what they consider to be earth worship for the direction of mankind and Earth's future evolution on every possible level. Again, the conclusion is simple. We had it right when we made them mad. We should pull away from the United Nations as quickly and thoroughly as possible. We should discredit the United Nations. We should reject everything the United Nations tries to impose on us, at whether it's the local level, the state level, ideally, eventually at the United States federal level, and we should defund it completely. It is time for us to recognize the United Nations as an evil cult, and it is time for us to abolish the United Nations.